Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 English First Additional Language. Today is the last of the series of lessons on Macbeth. We finished yesterday with the last scene of Act 5, and today we're going to look a bit at the themes and again at the characters. So please have your Macbeth book and notes with you that you can follow and add notes as I'm explaining. It's a beautiful day to learn something new. So here we go. We're going to start with the themes, and we're only going to discuss a few of the themes that we see in the drama. The first one we're going to look at is good versus evil. Now, good versus evil, remember when you answer a theme question, it will usually be either for 2 or 3 marks. Now, when you answer a theme question, you must first let the marker know that you know what the meaning of that theme is, and then you give examples. Now, very, very important, again, you have to look at how your question is asked. Is it asked about the play as a whole, or only this scene, or only this extract? Because that will determine the content of your answer. So make very sure to look at those key words. So what you do first is you give a definition of that theme, and then you give an example, and then you explain how it's applicable in this extract here or in this scene. Okay, right. So the good versus evil is the conflict between two people where one of the forces is clearly doing what is wrong, evil, and the other is trying to prevent them. And that is the good part. So that is my explanation of the theme good versus evil. And then a perfect example of evil throughout the play is anywhere where the witches is involved. The witches are involved. So anywhere where you see the witches, the theme of good versus evil can be applied. And then in Act 2, Macbeth promises Banquo that it will be to his advantage to support Macbeth. But Banquo makes it clear that he will stay faithful to his king and do the right thing. So here Macbeth represents evil and Banquo good. Macbeth hiring the murderers to have Banquo killed. Again, Macbeth evil, Banquo good. Macbeth commands the killing of Macduff's family, and then Macduff killing Macbeth. The good versus the evil. So the good killed the evil here. Right, so here's just a few examples from the play. Remember, an example in your answer, you must always refer back to the text. Otherwise, your answer is just a generic answer that we can't credit any marks for. Right, so as we've seen, the conflict between good and evil is the major theme of the play, and all the other themes are actually connected to it. And then remember, some of the values that we consider good is things like loyalty and generosity and honesty and courage. And values that we see as evil is represented by treachery, being a traitor, dishonesty, cowardice, lack of moral discipline. Right, that is good versus evil. The next one we're going to look at is reversal of values. Now, this is the distorted world of the witches where nothing is as it seems. And the perfect example of that is fair is foul and foul is fair. Good is bad and bad is good in the witches' world. So the forces of good represented by Duncan are overthrown by those of evil represented by Macbeth and the witches. Remember, this theme is also closely related with the themes of appearance versus reality and equivocation. And then as a result of this reversal of values, what appears to be good and innocent to some of the characters in the play is often evil and corrupt. Then appearance versus reality. Now, appearance is merely what something looks like, and reality is the truth, or what really exists. That is my explanation of what this theme is. So something appears in a certain way. It's just what something looks like, but reality is how it really is. So the truth. So for instance, the Macbeths acts like gracious hosts, but are planning the murder of their guest Duncan. Lady Macbeth smears the gods with blood to make it appear like they are guilty of the murder, but in reality, Macbeth killed them. And Lady Macbeth advises her husband to appear as innocent as the flower, but to be the serpent under it. Those are all examples from the play of appearance versus reality. So in this theme, we see that the truth is often disguised or hidden. All right. So, for example, innocence is actually evil and loyalty is treachery, and the truth can often be a lie. The next one we see is ambition. Now, in this play, we see the destructive power of ambition and the effect of ambition on different people. Macbeth allows his ambition to overwhelm him and becomes a murdering, paranoid maniac. All right? How did that happen? The weird sisters, the witches' prophecies, spur both Macbeth and Lady Macbeth to try to fulfill their ambitions. But the witches never make Macbeth or his wife do anything. It is their own ambition. But on the other hand, Banquo refuses to allow ambition to come before honor. He also received a prophecy from the witches, but he did not let his ambition get the better of him. Right, and then another example, Malcolm's ambition is not like Macbeth's at all, because Malcolm does not want to get rid of Macbeth merely to become king himself. He wants to get rid of Macbeth because he is a tyrant and Scotland needs to be liberated. So the play shows the consequences of uncontrolled ambition and power. The Macbeths never enjoy their power. They are totally disillusioned. Lady Macbeth commits suicide and Macbeth becomes a cruel monster who is hunted down and killed. Overthrow of natural order. Another theme we have to look at. Remember the natural order, the chain of being that was very important during the Elizabethan times. So this is an important theme. So when Macbeth disrupts the social and political order by murdering Duncan and usurping the throne, nature goes haywire. Incredible storms rage, the earth tremors, animals go insane and eat each other. So unnatural acts like the murder of a king and the presence of witches are always accompanied by unnatural events in nature, the overthrow of the natural order. So the murder of Duncan is an act of sacrilege which violates the chain of being and plunges the world into chaos. After Duncan's murder, the animals are behaving strangely. The owl and the horses. The owl attacked a falcon and the horses ate each other. And then there's storms and lightning and thunder always accompany the witches' meeting. Remember, this theme can be closely linked to the reversal of values. Now, equivocation. Remember, equivocation is the use of ambiguous language to conceal the truth or to avoid committing oneself. Now, in this case, it was to conceal the truth. If you think about the predictions of the witches to Macbeth in the beginning of the play, the warning of Banquo, where he says you can't believe them because they will tell you the truth about trivial things, but for the real important things, they will lie to you. So they will gain your trust by telling you the truth, and then they are going to equivocate. They're going to tell you half-truths about the important things, but they have won your trust and you will believe them. And then the most important and obvious example of equivocation is, of course, the apparitions. Now, the apparitions that spoke to Macbeth after he went to the witches, and he blatantly, he asked to speak to their masters and not the witches themselves. And then the apparitions appeared, where the first one said, "Beware of Macduff." And what Macbeth heard is, "Be careful of Macduff." And then what the apparition actually meant was, "Macduff is going to kill you." Right, so a half-truth. The second one that said, "Be bloody, be bold and resolute." So what did Macbeth hear? He says, "All men are born of a woman." So Macbeth believes he does not need to be afraid of any man. No man can harm him. But what they meant was, Macduff was not born in the normal way. And because he was born by cesarean section, he will be able to harm Macbeth. And then the third apparition, what Macbeth heard was, "He will never be defeated until Birnam Wood uproots itself and marches the hill at Dunsinane Castle." Now, what they meant was that Malcolm and his army will cut down branches and carry them above their heads when they march to Dunsinane to attack Macbeth. So the apparitions are the most important example of the theme of equivocation. Remember that lesson where I gave you the summary of exactly what the apparition said and what it meant and what Macbeth understood. Right, you have to know that off by heart. That's a very, very important part to study. Right, and then the last theme we're going to look at is kingship versus tyranny. Now, kingship is the state or position of being king. And here we have more than one character that's applicable to this theme. Well, we start with Duncan. Duncan is a good and humble and honest king. But remember, he was too trusting. And then Malcolm does not have his father's trusting nature. We can see that when he tests Macduff's loyalty when Macduff went to England. So Malcolm possesses all the king-becoming qualities. Right, then in England, we saw King Edward of England. He is a virtuous king who has received the gifts of healing and prophecy from God. And then when all the other characters talk about Macbeth, they call him a tyrant, all right? And this emphasizes the fact that he is a usurper and a murderer. Now remember, when you answer questions, if there's anything about a theme, you have to look at, first of all, what is the theme, right? How did I ask the question? Do they ask you, they give you the theme, discuss how the theme of kingship versus tyranny is applicable in this extract, right? Now they give you the theme, and you must discuss how it's applicable only in this extract. It's only that extract in your question paper that you have in front of you. Or they can ask you, discuss the theme of ambition in the play as a whole. That is easier because you have to look at the play as a whole. Then you can look at all the examples where ambition was applicable. Make sure again, what is the theme you need to discuss? Where is it applicable? Is it this extract, this scene, play as a whole, or up to this point in the drama? And look at your mark allocation. Remember, you have to give enough information in order to receive the marks. Right. I know we have in a previous lesson looked at characters a bit, but what we're going to do now is a bit different because we're going to look at what role did they play and was there any development throughout the play? How did they start out and how did they end up for a few characters in this drama? So first of all, we have Macbeth. Now, who was he? He was first of all Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and then at the end, Macbeth was the King of Scotland. His main trait, if we have to take everything of who Macbeth is, his main trait was ambition. Right, his role in the play. Right, he was the hero to the anti-hero. He makes a choice to yield to his ambitious desires and to usurp the throne. Look at the words. He makes the choice. Yes, Lady Macbeth influenced him to kill Duncan. She never forced him. He made his own decision. Right. And then he starts out loyal to Duncan. He ends up, he was a tyrant and he was killed by Macduff. And character development. He changed from a leader, from a loyal subject, from a nobleman to a tyrant. If we look at Lady Macbeth, obviously she was wife of Macbeth. Her main trait, ambition and determination. So she likes to be in control of situations. Now that was obviously in the beginning of the play. Her role, what was the main role that she had to do? She was the spur to Macbeth. She was the motivation to spur him on to action. When he refused to kill Duncan, she was the spur that moved him over to action. She starts out as strong and supportive of her husband. She ends up, she goes mad and commits suicide. Obviously, she goes mad because of her guilty conscience. What she said in the beginning, a little bit of water will clear us of this deed. It's ironic because the opposite happened. If you remember in Act 5, Scene 1, where she was sleepwalking and she said, "Out, damned spot, out." And then when she said all the perfumes in Arabia would not take away the smell of blood. So she could not get rid of her guilty conscience about everything that they did. So her development was the other way around. She went from strong to weak. Then we have the three witches. Who were they? They were supernatural beings. Okay, what were their main trait? They tell the future in riddles, equivocation, right, half-truths. And then the role in the play, they tempt people to do evil. They had their sights set on Macbeth and they tempt him to do evil, right? And how did they start out? They started out by tempting Macbeth. They ended up by leading Macbeth to his destruction because of the false confidence that they gave him with the apparitions. They knew he would still believe what they said and that he would be responsible for his own destruction. No character development. They were always evil and dangerous. Now, Duncan, who was he? He was the King of Scotland. His main trait, he was kingly but gullible. Remember, when I say kingly, it means he was a good and a humble and an honest king. Right, his role in the play, he stands in the way of Macbeth's ambition. The witches prophesied that Macbeth will be king. While Duncan was alive, it was not possible for Macbeth to become king. So he stands in the way of Macbeth's ambition. He starts out kind but too trusting. So his fatal main flaw was the fact that he was too trusting. And he ends up murdered early on by Macbeth. So there was no time for him to develop. The next character we look at is Banquo. Who was he? He was also a Thane. He was also a general with Macbeth in Duncan's army. And he was also Macbeth's comrade. He was his friend. His main trait, honesty and loyalty. Throughout Banquo's existence in this play, you see him as an honest and a loyal man, and he does not make a secret of it how he feels about that. His role in the play, he was a foil to Macbeth. He shows up Macbeth's lack of moral fiber. So he is everything that Macbeth is not. So he starts out as a loyal friend to Macbeth and a liegeman. He fought side by side, a nobleman with Macbeth. He ends up murdered by his friend. So his character development, he's tempted by the witches, but he stays true to his principles. Tempted by the witches, but stays true to his principles. Then we have Macduff. He was the Thane of Fife. His main trait was his love of his country. Role in the play, he was also a foil to Macbeth. He shows up Macbeth's disregard for his king and his country. Right, so after the death of Banquo, Macduff was the major foil to Macbeth. He starts out loyal to Scotland and therefore to Duncan. He ends up restorer of peace to Scotland and avenger of his own family's murder by killing Macbeth. Right, remember when he found out that Macbeth had his whole family killed, he vowed to get revenge, and that he did. Character development. Macduff was always heroic, but he takes a more central role later on when he goes to England to speak to Malcolm, and when he comes back and start to fight against Macbeth's army to take back Scotland. And then the main part that he played was at the end of the drama where he killed Macbeth. Then Malcolm, he was the oldest son of Duncan. His main trait, if we look at the whole personality of Malcolm, we can see integrity was his main trait. He's also a foil to Macbeth because he shows the difference between good and bad leadership. Malcolm is an example of good leadership, where Macbeth is an example of bad leadership. In the beginning, he started out as young and untested. Remember the very first battle at the opening of the play, he was still too young to fight in the battle with Macbeth and Banquo, but he ends up admired leader and king. So he grew as a person, he grew as a leader when he gave the command to the soldiers to cut down the branches and hold them before him and walk up to Dunsinane. Right, so he was a leader, the people listened to him, and he was a very good and strategic soldier. He grew a lot. So his character development, he grows up and takes his place as king with confidence, and that goes hand in hand with him being a good leader as well. In the very last scene where he said, I will reward those of you who fought with me. I will let the people come back to Scotland. I will restore order with the help of God. Right, the next character we're looking at is Ross. He was a Thane. Now, his main trait, Ross believes what he sees and hears. What was Ross's role in the play? He was a messenger. He lets the audience know what is happening with all the messengers that he delivered. He starts out young and credulous, and he ends up changing sides from supporting Macbeth to supporting Malcolm. Character development, he learns to be less trusting. He trusted Macbeth with everything. He couldn't think that he would do something wrong. And he learned the hard way. Then Lennox was also a Thane. Lennox believes in the natural order. His role in the play, time and again, he points out the unnatural events. He starts out loyal to Duncan. He ends up, he loses his faith in Macbeth. He also changes sides to support Malcolm, but there's not a lot of development shown. Right, I know this was in a previous lesson, but it's very important. Again, the meaning of some certain words that we use. Remember, regicide is the killing of the king. Patricide is the killing of your father. So Macbeth was guilty of regicide. Malcolm and Donalbain was accused of patricide. And then Macbeth was guilty of sacrilege. It was a crime against God because he killed God's representative on earth, which was King Duncan. Then a soliloquy, it's speaking your thoughts out loud. Equivocation, as we said, is half-truth, the use of ambiguous language. Coronation is the crowning of a king, and that was usually done in Scotland at a place called Scone. Aside, and now that is in the stage directions in your play when you read it, and aside will be in brackets, and that is where the character moves away and talk that the audience can hear, but not the other characters, right? Because remember, this play takes place on a stage. So obviously the character must speak out loud to let the audience know what he is thinking. And then the same with within, it's also stage directions in brackets, and that means it happens off stage. It is like the bell that was rung as a signal that everything was ready, that Macbeth can kill Duncan, or the knocking that happened after the murder of Duncan, which you only can hear the knocking, but you don't see who is knocking. That is within, off stage. And then prophecy is a statement about the future made by someone with magical powers, the witches, to Macbeth and Banquo. And then Thane is the title of a nobleman in Scotland. And remember, at the end of the drama, Malcolm promoted all the Thanes to earls. Right, we have time for the last few open-ended questions and answers. Remember, when you answer an open-ended question, you must make a point, you must explain your point, give an example, and link to the question. Make a point, explain, example, link. Refer to the play as a whole. Right, that's your first key part of your question. Now you know you must take the whole play into account. In your view, why are some of the issues explored in Macbeth still relevant today? So now you must think, what happened in Macbeth in the story that are issues that is still happening today? Right, and in the marking guidelines, here's a few examples. The play's themes of greed and political ambition, good versus evil, and the supernatural are universal or timeless. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are corrupted by the greed for power. Power still corrupts ambitious rulers and leaders throughout the world. The conflict between good and evil is not only confined to Macbeth. Good still triumphs over evil, like the overthrow of dictatorship or the rule of tyrants. And then the war or rebellion against the authority of a country, like the rebellion against King Duncan's authority, is still prevalent in many parts of the world. So you have to know what's going on around you in the world in order to be able to answer a question like this. But if you think about the theme of ambition, good versus evil, the power that corrupts ambitious leaders, etc., you will have in our country especially a lot of information to use here. Next question, consider the play as a whole. Again, it's a whole play. Lady Macbeth is responsible for the tragedy that takes place. Discuss your view. Right, here you must agree or disagree. Make very sure that you state clearly to the marker, yes, I agree that Lady Macbeth is responsible for the tragedy. That's your first sentence in your answer, that the marker can immediately see what is your point of view. And then you start with your motivation and your examples. Remember, immediately make it clear. I agree or I disagree. You can give a combination answer of agree and disagree. Make very sure when you say you agree, motivate it correctly. Disagree, motivate it. Read your question very carefully. So Lady Macbeth is responsible for the tragedy. Agree. She's the architect, so she is behind the plan to murder Duncan. She persuades Macbeth to kill Duncan, and when Macbeth expresses reluctance to kill Duncan, she insults him, thereby forcing him to commit the deed. I disagree that Lady Macbeth is responsible for the tragedy. It is the witches that sowed the seed of murder through their prophecy that Macbeth will become king. She's not totally responsible, as it is Macbeth who carries out the actual murder. Lady Macbeth and Macbeth were equally complicit in Duncan's murder. Right, make very sure. Then, can the witches be blamed for the tragedy in this drama? Discuss your view. So again, make it clear, what is your point of view? No, the witches cannot be blamed for the tragedy. The witches' knowledge of future events clearly indicates that they have supernatural powers and they enjoy using those powers to cause chaos and confusion. They never force anyone to do anything. Instead, they tell half-truths, equivocation, to trap people into giving into their own dark desires. Or yes, the witches can be blamed. Macbeth did not at first approach the witches. They approached him and created greed and obsession in him. This caused that unnecessary murders took place and Scotland was brought to its knees. From your point of view, do you think the witches are to blame for the crisis in Scotland? Again, make clear, what is your point of view? Yes, I do think the witches are to blame for the crisis. They are the ones who planted the seed in Macbeth's mind to become king. If they did not tell Macbeth that he was going to become king, he killed Duncan. The witches can be blamed. Macbeth did not consult them. They approached him and created greed and unnecessary murders took place. Or no, the witches are not to blame. The witches' knowledge of future events clearly indicates that they have supernatural powers, and they also clearly enjoy using these powers to cause chaos and confusion among mankind. It's important to realize that the witches never force anyone to do anything. Instead, they tell half-truths to trap people into giving into their own dark desires. They may have suggested that he was going to become king, but they did not tell him how it was going to happen. So Macbeth and his wife are to blame for causing the crisis in Scotland. In your opinion, is Macbeth immature and impulsive? Discuss your view. Yes, he is immature and impulsive. He's easily fooled into believing that the predictions are true. When he hears that Malcolm will succeed Duncan to the throne, he immediately thinks of ways that he can become king. In other words, immature and impulsive. Immature means he does not make responsible decisions, and impulsive means he does not think about it. He does not sit and consider all the pros and the cons. The next one, is not satisfied with what he has. He is admired by everyone for his bravery, and he already has 2 lordship titles. Or no, Macbeth is not immature and impulsive. He has hoped that he would become the next king, as he's related to Duncan. His aspiration to become king is destroyed, and he has to think of means to achieve his ambition. He does think carefully about the murder of Duncan, contemplating both advantages and disadvantages. However, he is persuaded by his wife to continue with the murder. Do you agree that Macbeth is not inherently evil, but rather a victim of the motives of other people? Yes, he is in conflict between good and evil within himself. Inherently, he is good. He's a trusted and loyal servant. Forces from outside, the witches and Lady Macbeth, have pressured him to become the way he turns out to be. He's a valiant soldier and admired for his bravery. He fights for his country. He would not have been admired so much if he had not been inherently good. Or if you say no, Macbeth is not inherently evil, the battle scene already showed. No, if you said no, he is inherently evil, then The battle scene already shows a cruel side of him when he slices MacDonald open. And he has a mind of his own. He cannot blame the witches for deceiving him, nor can he blame Lady Macbeth for persuading him to continue with the murder. He is evil and does everything just to satisfy his own ambition. And then refer to the drama as a whole. Do you think it is wise of Macbeth to kill the king in order to realize his own ambition to become king? So was it a good thing to kill Duncan so that he can become king? Yes. Duncan nominates his son as successor, so Macbeth would not have been in line to become king unless he killed Duncan. When Malcolm and Donalbain flee after Duncan's murder, Macbeth is named king and he gets exactly what he has desired for so long. It seems as if fate has played right into Macbeth's hands. Duncan's stay at Inverness and the fleeing of his two sons after the murder. Or no? Even before the murder of Duncan, Macbeth is tormented by a heavy sense of guilt regarding what he is about to do. He mentions at least 3 reasons why he should not kill the king. Macbeth also realizes that if he kills the king, there would be certain consequences which he will have to deal with. After Macbeth has killed Duncan, he can never find peace again, and he is suspicious of all his subjects. It becomes easier for Macbeth to kill again and order the killing of those who hold a threat to him. He cannot sleep peacefully, and his reign is never peaceful. Now that concludes all our lessons on Macbeth. I truly hope that this was helpful to you. If I can give you any advice, go through all your notes, go through the lessons again, familiarize yourself with where everything happened, who did it, when did it happen, etc. And then for revision, the best thing you can do is to work out old papers. Go on the internet, find the question papers from 2017, the September and November papers, and work out those Macbeth questions. It might not be the same extract, but the questions, the format of the questions remains the same. You will see that if you work out more than 2 or 3 papers. So best of luck with your Macbeth and your exams and the rest of your year. Next week, we are going to continue with a few language lessons again and some visual literacy. So I hope you have a wonderful afternoon further. Stay safe, make wise choices. Goodbye.